Morning, everybody. Sarah Batchelor here, the Neuro-Spicy music teacher and still a teacher in the province of Alberta. I've decided to start a series of videos about getting kids set up for band because it's spring. And on the group chats, I'm seeing so many questions about helping kids select instruments. And this is something I think I do really well. So, in this series, today I just want to do kind of a brief overview and then talk to you a little bit about some of the choices I make for setting up my program. And then we will do specific videos on how to train your mentor students to assess the other kids, how to run the instrument petting zoo, how to communicate with parents. I'm going to do a session on or video on uh, assigning instruments through the lens of diagnoses because that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And then, of course, the actual like, how do I introduce each of these instruments to these kids? So, if that's what you need this year, welcome. Um, Even if you are an experienced teacher, there might be something you can get out of that. And if you watch and put in the comments your strategies, I would love to learn from you as well. Because as you'll see, some of the examples I use as I go through this are absolutely things that I've learned from my colleagues, from my students. I learned so much from my kids, right? This isn't just my experience, right? But I have a formula and a system that works really well for me. And I've used it in urban settings, I've used it in mandatory programs, I've used it in rural schools, and I know this works. So I thought I'd share what I know, and if it helps you, great. If this sort of content resonates with you, like, subscribe, share with people you know, because, well, honestly, I don't know how we would survive without each other in this world. And if you're in a situation where you're the only music teacher in your school or one of few in your division, you might feel like you're on a bit of an island. And so I'm hoping that this channel is a place that can become community and can support each other because I swear to God, I would not be have made it almost 25 years, or it's my 25th year, teaching band without so many great musicians and conductors and other teachers who've supported me and shared the things that have saved me time and stress. So that is sort of what I like to do and is help other people that way. And so if you like it, please like, share, subscribe. Happy to have you here. So we're going to talk very briefly. Let's start about the types of programs we might have. In my school, we have two music teachers. There's an elementary, and then I'm the upper elementary band because I'm a K to 9. So when they come to me in grade 6, they've had a solid elementary music education. That changes a lot for me. I taught for 20 years almost in a smaller community where band was mandatory in grade 7, and that was often their very first music experience, other than maybe recorder if they had a teacher who chose to teach recorder. So I was coming into a blank canvas completely with them. Whereas with the kids I have right now, they have some context. In fact, if they've had me this year, they have lots of context because I sort of throughout the year build up to next year you can maybe do band, right? And actually I do that right from day one with kindergarten. I teach with my door open. At least at some point in the year I bring the kinders in. I'm like, okay, who's taller than a bari sax, who's taller than a flute? I get them super excited about the idea that they get to do band when they're little, before things are cool or not cool. And then that really does help my enrollment. But that works really well in the building I teach. But if I'm recruiting from other buildings, like when I had my mandatory program or before they changed boundaries here, I had feeder schools. That does change how you recruit. But it's really important that you get out there and you get to meet those kids, right? They need to put a face to the name. Because ideas are fine, but kids are really don't do well with abstract. So they need to meet you and see how fun you're going to be. And honestly, as fun and exciting and passionate as we are, nobody can sell band like a band kid. So bring your band kids. I use my oldest group that I have in the school, whatever school I'm in at the time, and they're my mentors, and they help me do what I call my embouchure assessment, my embouchure testing at the instrument petting zoo, and they collect all that data for me. So I bring them to my initial meeting with the kids, and they like, this is the flute, and they go, "Doo-doo-doo-doo," and they play their little thing for them, right? And that gets the kids really excited. Um, then I do what's called the instrument petting zoo, and that's where my kids get to try the mouthpieces. So we try a flute head joint, we try a clarinet or an alto mouthpiece. I use a trumpet station with the trumpet mouthpiece, and then I have a low brass station with the baritone and a tuba mouthpiece. The reason I do both sizes of mouthpieces is because kids' faces may fit one or the other better, right? Legitimately, I have baritone players who would be lousy trumpet players, right? It just because you can buzz doesn't mean it's the right size instrument for you, right? So they get to try all of those, and then they give me their top 3 choices, and then from there I assign if their parents say they're taking band. And I test everybody. I say, even if you don't think you're going to take band, you're going to try this. That's my only rule is everybody tries it because maybe you'll change your mind over the summer or whatever. But then I have the data and I'm not going back and having to like pull kids from classes and test them to see where they fit. Because honestly, I think that without doing some kind of embouchure assessment, you really aren't setting yourself up for success. Not everybody's face is designed to play the instrument they think they want to play. Right? You might want the flute because it's cute and it fits in your backpack, but your face may not be a flute face. That's okay. It's not a judgment. It's just a fact, right? So I find that if the kids, and also knowing that they've successfully produced a sound once really helps when they actually get the whole instrument in their hands and the first time is kind of a disaster for them because resilience is something that needs to be taught. Right? We need to teach these kids that failure is part of the process. It's expected. It's okay as long as we don't stay there, right? It's just a fact, right? Oh, well, we sucked. What do we do to fix this? So that's really, really important. So let's just take a side quest over to percussion for a second because I didn't mention them. Now, I don't do percussion in first year band as just percussionists. Everybody learns a wind instrument first. And that's because the one thing everybody has in common in the room is they're all blowing, right? And I know we spend a lot of time teaching how to pitch to the right place for brass instruments, right? Because high, low, where are they? They're all over the place, right? Flexibility, moving between keys for the flutes and clarinets. Those sorts of things take a lot of intensive teaching and practice. And percussionists, especially if they've had you before or another music teacher who's competent, can sight read the beginner band book. All of it. Now, do they know the technique? Do they know how to do rolls? Probably not. Depends, right? Like my kids have a basic roll. They know what a flam is coming in, but not all kids do. And that's okay because those sorts of rudiments are easy enough to teach in small groups or throughout the year. So what I do for percussion is everybody starts on a wind instrument. We have percussion days, dedicated days where we teach some of those rudiments. And then in March, I do auditions. They audition on snare, bass drum, xylophone. And then I pick who I think will be a good fit. And we go from there. They can be percussionists next year full-time in band. For the remainder of the year, they get percussion parts, but they still play their instrument for at least one piece. And that's worked really well for me. And I'll talk a little bit more about how I structure that with my squeak and squawk and things in future videos in this process. But I found by just taking percussion out of the equation initially, it really helped. The other thing I've been able to do, and there's ways to do it. I do, sometimes I do it with like more of a sectional setting, but you really need to have some focused just brass classes and just woodwind classes when you first get started. Because boo, 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 boo is very different than moving between the keys. And by the time you get them set up and you get the trumpets on the right pitch, they've moved their hands, right? So it really, really, really speeds up things for you if you spend some intensive time just with the woodwinds and just with the brass. But we'll talk about that in future videos about how to set that up because I've got 2 or 3 ways that you can convince your admin to make that work for you. So preparing for the instrument petting zoo, I have my mentor students all sit in a circle with their instruments and we say, basically I just say to them, because I'm a very inquiry-based human, I'm like, try something, see if it works. Show your friend how you play your instrument and explain it to them. And then we sort of talk and we come up with common language. What did we say? Did we buzz? Did we say spit? Did we say aim? Did we say, what did we say? And what exactly do we do with our face? Because clarifying that for them actually helps them too. And then later when you're talking about intonation issues with the clarinets and you're like, okay, well, what do you think? Remember what we did when we were making a sound? What part of your mouth did you firm exactly? And there's some context there for them, right? But they need to build that vocabulary. So we talk about the embouchure, we talk about what's happening with aperture, like the hole in the middle. And then I show them how I would set them up. And I use a really great resource that I've purchased online. It wasn't cheap, but it was great by Band Directors Tuck Shop called the Embouchure Project. And I'll feature that in the video where I show you how we start the instruments a little bit more. But we come up with common language. And then I have a poster and it's just got the steps. And then they practice on each other, getting each other to start the different instruments. On the instrument day itself, I have stations set up. I run doubles of the stations and I'll show you how that works. It's hard to explain when I say it out loud. People go blink. But so I can have smaller groups going through. And what my students are looking for is how quickly they could produce the sound. Like, was it a first try, second try, third try? How many prompts did they need? We're also looking at focus, like were they focused on what they were being told, and persistence, because persistence is really important, especially for some instruments, right? Where we know that they're not going to have instant success, like say the flute, right? The silly little sucker takes more air than the tuba to play, right? Only a third of what you blow actually goes into the silly thing. which leads me to the first question kids often ask. Which instrument is the easiest to play? Or which instrument is the hardest? And my answer is all of them and none of them. So they all have a tricky time. You have to expect this, right? So the flute and the trombone, your tricky time is pretty much right at the beginning. Because flutes, you got to use a lot of air and your arms are going to get tired. And trombones, you don't have like set positions. You have to kind of figure out how to hear that and feel that and build that muscle memory. So the beginning is a tricky time for you. Clarinets, you're pretty simply golden until, November. Then you're going to hit a tricky time when we try to play some notes called B and C that are kind of going what we call over the break. It's hard, but you'll figure it out. Don't worry. Trumpets. Some of you are going to find the beginning hard. Some of you aren't going to find your tricky part till later, right? It depends how quickly you learn to listen, and that if you sing your part first, then you can probably play it, right? There's a few things we can do to help the tricky part be less. But often I find trumpets, your guys' tricky part comes in the spring when we're trying to play some of the higher notes. We just have to learn to change how our mouth has been faced or working the whole time. So it's going to be tricky for a little bit. Alto saxes, saxophones in general, dudes, you're golden for probably the first year. Next year, I'm going to say to you, you're too loud. And you're going to stress because you're not going to know how to fix that. But we'll get there. We'll work through it together. Low brass, like tubas, baritones, same thing as the trumpets, right? Your tricky time's probably going to come when we're trying to play in different ranges. But good news is we'll figure it out together, right? And as long as we kind of set them up with a good idea of what is actually going to happen, I find that really helps. And I also like to point out that we're going to hit tricky things at different times. So we have to be patient and supportive of the other people on our team when those things are happening, right? When we do the instrument petting zoo and afterwards, I tell the kids they can tell me their top 3 choices, and then I assign from there. If you have a mandatory program, I would still do the embouchure testing, but I personally don't assign instruments. I think if you are being forced, as some of them will see it, to take a program, that you need to have some autonomy, need some say. And because power and control are huge issues, especially in middle school, a generation which is used to negotiating, which isn't a bad thing, we need to keep that in mind, right? And so you need to maybe think about maybe not so much what we want, what's perfect, but sometimes to get things started and keep kids in band, we need to compromise a little bit. So maybe you're going to have a few more trumpets in your sections than you normally would. But I had a lot more success in the years with mandatory band where I allowed them to choose their instruments versus when I assigned. With a program where they're choosing to be with me, I don't feel so bad assigning. Kids get their first or second choice almost always, right? The only time they would end up with a third if they were late getting in their paperwork and their kind of everything else has been assigned, or they've moved here in September and, I really, really, really don't need another clarinet. It depends, right? And so I also want to caution you not to just think within the limited of like just flute, alto, trumpet, trombone, because I know a lot of band programs, they do simplified instrumentation. I don't see the point. With the exception of maybe the oboe and the French horn, I would start just about anything first year. And I still start those instruments first year for certain kids. But my criteria for a French horn player is different than for a trumpet player, right? I want somebody I know has relative pitch or close to, can hear. Kids who play violin are fantastic for French horn. I need somebody who understands that because you can play any note and any fingering on the French horn. True story. And like with oboe, you need a kid who's really independent, right? I have a fantastic oboist right now. He's one of those special kids you get 2 or 3 in your career who are going to go on and just play in orchestras and things. But what sold me on him trying oboe first year was his persistence score. It didn't matter what I handed him. He was willing to work through it, and he was the one who was requesting the oboe. So I'm okay with like all sorts of things in my room, because there's so many things in common between the instruments that it doesn't make it that much harder to teach just one more. And I know a lot of band teachers are hesitant because, especially beginner band, because you're like, I don't play that instrument very well. Well, that sound you're going to hear me play on the flute is probably the only sound I can make on the flute. I know my fingerings. I'm learning them slowly over time. Silly ADHD brain, it doesn't stick sometimes. Here's the trick I use. Number 1, I make sure they see me play everything, whether I play it well or play it badly. And often I play it badly, and that's okay. I make sure they see me play everything before Halloween. And that way they think I can play everything before, and they never question me again. Assertiveness, sorry, whatever. Establish dominance. But no, that trick works for me. But the other thing is learning with your kids isn't a bad thing, right? And I also want to teach them strategies. My program is very much about what are you going to do about it? Because I'm not going to answer every question. You can see behind me my fingering charts are posted, my wall of musical knowledge. Kids are free to use those references even on tests because honestly, it's in their environment. They're using their environment to learn. That's a strategy. That's a life skill I want them to have. I want to reward them for that. So if they're smart enough to realize that the answer is up on the wall and they use that, good for you. Um, but like we use fingering charts from the beginning. I have very simplified fingering charts that I can share. I've tried lots of different things. I have a fingering chart that has just like the ABC notes and then one that's just sharps and one that's just flats because I find that the chromatic ones really throw for visual tracking for some of my kids. And we'll talk more about that when I talk about assigning through the lens of diagnoses and some neuroaffirming tips to get kids started. But that's a them problem. I mean, it's okay not to know stuff. What's important is you know how to learn, look it up. And then once everybody's got their instrument assigned, I have a parent meeting where I go over my program and I'm like, hey guys, welcome to the sport of band. Because, you know, in soccer, you're going to get lots of emails. Expect this, right? I lay out what my expectations are for their involvement. I tell them what practice looks like in my world. All of those sorts of things. And then I have an instrument supplier come in, St. John's Music or someone, and we do the rentals so that the kids can have their instruments ready for them in the fall. Then they leave for the summer and they come back all excited. And I start them off with what I call band boot camp. We do a couple weeks of music theory and written work. And I find that that's a very, very important thing. I'm just checking the clock behind me because I've got to go do supervision. One of the reasons I did this now is because I yipper yapper and I figured if I put myself on a timeline, I'll get through just what I need to get through. All right. So, anyways, I do my band boot camp, which is a whole nother episode. And then I introduce the instruments for the first time through a day called Squeak and Squawk. And that's when I bring in professional clinicians and we put them in small groups and they teach them the fundamentals of putting their stuff together, oiling valves. Please have someone teach them that. How to play the first three notes of the concert B flat scale. And then the first day of class, when I go, oh, everyone play me concert B flat, they all know what the heck I'm talking about. So, if these sorts of topics interest you and you want to learn more, keep tuning in. I'm going to be periodically throwing more videos into this series over the next week or two. The next one I'm going to do will be on how to demonstrate the instruments, how to get kids to make a sound on the flute every time, that sort of thing. All right. And I will share all of my resources with you in the comments. Please like, follow, share. It's been great having you here. And I get to go outside and do supervision now.